Greetings everyone, my name is Pavos Termach, and now we'll unveil the top news of recent days. J.D. Vance, the Republican candidate for vice presidency, has outlined a plan to end the war. According to him, Russia, Ukraine and Europe want to end this war, so Trump will propose the following peace agreement: a demilitarized zone along the current front line. The zone should be heavily fortified so that the Russians do not invade again. Russia receives guarantees of neutrality from Ukraine, and Ukraine doesn't join NATO or any allied institutions. In Ukraine, we ironically call such plans reliable and precise as a Swiss watch, because all this should work in words, but it will not. Because you think that Putin will give up part of the Kursk region, or does this requirement only work on Ukrainian territory? So it is somehow one-sided and takes into account Moscow's wishes and doesn't take into account international law and international borders, in principle like any alternative to the Ukrainian plan. Regarding strengthening the demarcation line, which will be heavily fortified so that the Russians do not invade again, what will stop the Russians from using drones to strike Ukraine? Who will react? International organization with harsh condemnation? After all, no one even reacted to the murder of 3 Red Cross workers by Russians yesterday. No one reacted to Russian drones on NATO territory. What will stop Russia from attacking again, as it did in 2022 after the illegal annexation of Crimea? Or maybe Vance wants to propose placing NATO troops on the demarcation line. But the third point of Vance's plan is Russia receives guarantees of neutrality from Ukraine, and Ukraine doesn't join NATO or any allied institution. But this means that Ukraine is losing sovereignty, because each country and its people have the right to decide for themselves which alliance to join. By the way, such a guarantee is another reason for Russia to attack again. After all, no one is stopping Putin or his successor from saying that we learned about secret talks about joining the EU or NATO, and therefore we're starting a new war, which the Russians will call a special military operation 2.0. By the way, they never tire of reminding that the Budapest Memorandum still exists, in which both Russia and the US, among other things, promised to respect the independence, sovereignty, and, importantly, borders of Ukraine. We have already realized that the Kremlin is not fulfilling its obligations. Now it's Washington's turn. In any case, Volodymyr Zelensky will present our Ukrainian plan for victory, for ending the war, to Donald Trump as well. And we really hope that the US president that will be elected will be adhered to this, no matter who the Americans will choose. The Central Bank of the Russian Federation raised the key rate to 19%. Current inflationary pressure remains high, said the head of their central bank. She prognoses for a further increase in the key rate. Annual inflation for the current year may exceed the July forecast range. And now the Russians have a rather interesting situation. After all, pro-Russian media and bloggers say that everything is fine in Russia and that Putin has transferred the Russian economy to military rails. But in fact, Putin spends a lot of money on the war, but at the same time remains outside the military economy. The Kremlin actively finances the production and restoration of weapons. This is mainly why there are reports about the growth of the Russian economy. But the economic sense of these expenses is about the same as sending money into the production of anything with the aim of immediately throwing it away. Because all these tanks, armored personnel carriers, howitzers and missiles are sent to the front, where they remain without affecting economic development of Russia. Another area of financing is recruiting. This can be compared to payments to citizens for committing suicide. Relatives get rich one time, there is a little economic sense. Well, the third goes to support the military action. This is very, very expensive. For example, spending on fuel, which burns very effectively after strikes of unknown drones. Now the Russian economy is divided into two. One is regular, the second is military. And it is the military economy that creates wild distortions. People are removed from the regular economy. Some go to the front, some to a military plant, some flee the country. As a result, salaries in the regular economy grow unjustifiably high due to the bar set by military salaries and payments, which kills business efficiency. Money from the military unit flows into the regular one, where it doesn't find a sufficient amount of goods and services, which causes inflation. This is called overheating of the economy, which is usually followed by a crisis. And in order to avoid this crisis, the Central Bank of Russia raises the key rate time after time. Usually it works. Money becomes more expensive, there are fewer loans, more deposits, extra money leaves circulation, inflation goes down. But in the Russian Federation, the problem is in the military economy, and the high rate is used to treat the regular one. It's like if the right hand was wounded and the tourniquet was applied to the left. The central bank cannot influence military spending, and it will continue to flow like a river, which means the distortion will not go away. In general, the situation in the Russian economy remains unhealthy, and will remain so as long as the insane military spending continues and the sanctions are in place. Of course, I hope that sooner or later the bubble will collapse, but we will not predict anything. We will calmly observe. European officials are holding consultations with the governments of the European Union countries to develop a common response to the confirmation of information about Iran supplying ballistic missiles to Russia for use in attacks on Ukraine. This was stated by EU Foreign Service representative Petr Stano during a briefing in Brussels. He recalled that back in March, during a meeting in the format of a European Council session, EU leaders warned Iran against such actions, warning that they would lead to additional sanctions.
Now, our allies provided a credible information, credible proof, and I can only say that the delivery of the Iranian weaponry, be it drones, but in this case also missiles, is very likely to contribute to escalation of the Russian military campaign against the Ukrainian people, targeting more Ukrainian cities, targeting more civilian targets in Ukraine, targeting more people in Ukraine. So this is further military escalation by Russia, because it shows the intent of Russia to take.
Stano stressed that such actions by Russia and Iran indicate that Moscow doesn't really want peace, and it is also an escalation of Iran's military support for Russia's illegal aggression. The EU called Iran's actions a direct threat to European security and a significant material escalation compared to the supply of Iranian drones and ammunition that Russia is already using against Ukraine. EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Josep Borrell has made it clear in his numerous contacts with Iranian counterparts, including the new administration, that this is something they warn against and urge Iran not to do. But since Iran appears to be doing this anyway, there will be a response. Borrell has already submitted proposals for targeted measures to member states as part of the EU's response to these latest developments, Stano said. At the same time, Borrell said that the transfer of missiles is happening in the midst of recent Russian attacks on Ukraine, including with ballistic missiles and drones, which demonstrate Russia's clear determination to continue the brutal war of aggression against Ukraine and its people. In particular, it chooses critical energy infrastructure as a target, seeking to cause as many civilian casualties and large-scale destruction as possible. Iranian ballistic missiles can now be used to cause even more suffering and destruction in Ukraine. The interlocutors in the European Commission explained that the European Union is currently coordinating sanctions with all member states. It is not yet known exactly what the final decision will look like. Recall that 2 EU countries, France and Germany, announced the introduction of sanctions against Iranian civil aviation, in particular Iran Air. Such actions were also supported by the US and Great Britain. And that concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching. Stay updated, comment, like and subscribe to our UATV English channel for even more news from Ukraine, because it is your support that really matters for us. Goodbye.